Allie, can I ask you something before we start?
Of course.
Have you ever looked at someone speaking English fluently and wondered, when did it happen? Like, was there one magical day when everything suddenly became easy?
Actually, I've wondered that a lot. Sometimes I watch interviews or podcasts, and the people speak so naturally. They're laughing, they're telling stories, they're not stopping to think about every sentence. And I always ask myself, when did they become fluent? Was it after they learned enough grammar or enough vocabulary? Or maybe one day something just clicked?
That's a great question. And honestly, I used to ask the same thing. When I saw someone speaking another language effortlessly, I thought, they must know a secret. Maybe they found the perfect course, maybe they had an incredible teacher, maybe they're just naturally gifted. I believed there had to be one big moment that changed everything.
So, was there? Did you have one of those moments?
Yes, but probably not in the way you're imagining. It wasn't a new grammar book, it wasn't a vocabulary app, it wasn't even a conversation with a native speaker. It was one habit, one small habit. And looking back, I think that one habit changed everything.
Now you really made me curious. What was it?
I'll tell you. But if I tell you now, it won't make any sense. Because when someone first told me about this habit, I almost ignored it. It sounded too simple, too ordinary. And honestly, I thought there was no way something so simple could make such a big difference.
So you didn't believe it?
Not at all. In fact, I thought I already knew the right way to learn English. I had a plan, a very serious plan.
Uh-oh. Whenever someone says they have a very serious plan, it usually doesn't end well.
You're not wrong. Every evening after dinner, I'd sit at my desk. I'd open my grammar book. My vocabulary notebook was always beside me. I'd have a pen, a highlighter, sometimes even sticky notes. I looked incredibly productive. If someone walked into the room, they'd probably think, wow, this guy's really going to become fluent.
That actually sounds like me. Everything organized, colorful notes, highlighters everywhere.
Exactly. And every night, I'd study for an hour, sometimes longer. When I finished, I'd close the book, lean back in my chair, and feel proud of myself. I'd think, today I got better. Tomorrow, I'll know even more.
That sounds like progress. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Study consistently?
That's what I believed. And to be fair, studying isn't bad. Grammar isn't bad. Vocabulary isn't bad. They're important. But here's what I never asked myself. Better at what? I was getting better at learning English, but I wasn't getting better at living in English. There's a big difference.
I've never thought about it that way.
Neither had I. Back then, English only existed at one time every day, study time. The book opened, English started. The book closed, English disappeared.
Wow. I think that's exactly how I treat it. When I finish studying, I go back to thinking in my own language, watching videos in my own language, reading in my own language, living my normal life. Then the next day, I open my English book again.
Exactly. Imagine trying to learn piano that way. You practice for 1 hour, then you spend the other 23 hours pretending music doesn't exist. Or imagine wanting to become a great swimmer, but you only think about swimming while reading a textbook. The moment you close the book, you never touch the water. Would you improve? Of course, a little, but very slowly, because learning about something isn't the same as living it.
So you were becoming really good at learning English, but not actually using it.
That's exactly what was happening. And the funny part is, I didn't realize it. Because every week, I knew more words, I understood more grammar, I could pass exercises. If someone gave me a test, I usually did well. So I thought everything must be working.
Until something happened?
Yes, something very ordinary, but it completely changed the way I looked at language learning. It wasn't an exam, it wasn't an interview, it wasn't some huge life-changing event. It was one simple conversation. One question, one answer. Or, more accurately, one answer I couldn't give.
Now I'm really curious. What happened?
I was traveling and I met someone around my age. He smiled and started talking to me. Nothing difficult, no complicated vocabulary, no advanced grammar, just normal conversation. The kind of conversation you have every day. He asked me, "So, what do you usually do on weekends?" Simple question, right?
Very simple. I could answer that. Well, I think I could.
I thought I could too. I understood every single word. Not 90%, not almost. Every word. Weekends, usually, do, what. Simple. My brain understood everything.
So, what did you say?
Nothing. For about 5 seconds, nothing. I just stood there, smiling, trying to buy myself time. You know that smile people make when they're secretly panicking?
I know exactly the smile. I've made that smile before.
Inside my head, everything became chaos. Okay, weekend. What is weekend again? No, I know that. Go, no, usually. Should I say normally? Wait, what's the grammar? Is it I usually go, I am usually going? No, that's wrong. Every sentence started, every sentence stopped. It felt like someone had opened 100 browser tabs inside my brain.
That is exactly what happens to me. It's like all the words I know suddenly hide from me.
Yes, and here's the strange part. If someone had handed me a piece of paper and asked, "Write 3 sentences about your weekend," I probably could have done it. Maybe not perfectly, but I could have done it. Speaking was different. Speaking didn't wait. The conversation kept moving. The other person was still smiling, waiting, and every second felt longer than the one before. Eventually, I answered, very slowly, very awkwardly, and somehow we continued talking. But something stayed with me after that conversation. Not embarrassment, not frustration, a question. One question that I couldn't stop asking myself. If I know so much English, why does speaking still feel so hard? That question stayed with me for a long time. Not just for a few hours, not just for a few days, for weeks, maybe even months. Every time I opened my grammar book, I heard that question in the back of my mind. If I know so much English, why does speaking still feel so hard? I couldn't ignore it anymore because something didn't make sense.
What do you mean?
Well, imagine someone who spends years reading books about riding a bicycle. They know how the gears work. They know how to balance. They know exactly where to put their feet. They could probably pass every written test about bicycles, but they've never actually ridden one. Would you expect them to ride confidently the first time?
Probably not. They'd still fall over.
Exactly. Knowing and doing are 2 completely different things. That's when I started wondering, maybe I wasn't bad at English. Maybe I was just inexperienced at using English. That thought completely changed the way I looked at learning.
I think a lot of people confuse those two things, including me. Sometimes I think I need to learn more, but maybe what I really need is to use what I already know.
That's a really important realization. And here's something that surprised me. When I looked back at all the English I had learned, I realized I already knew far more than I was actually using. Think about it. How many English words do you think you know?
Maybe a few thousand?
And one normal conversation, how many do you actually use?
Probably not many. Maybe a few hundred.
Exactly. Most conversations don't require thousands of words. They require confidence, comfort, and practice using the words you already have. That was something nobody had ever explained to me. Everyone kept telling me to add more vocabulary, more grammar, more exercises. Almost nobody asked me, how often do you actually live in English?
Live in English. I really like that phrase, but I'm not completely sure what it means yet.
Neither was I. And honestly, the first time someone said those words to me, I thought they sounded nice, but also a little strange. I remember having a conversation with someone who spoke English so naturally that I asked him, "What's your secret?" I expected a complicated answer, maybe a special course, maybe years of intensive study. Instead, he smiled and said, "I don't really study English anymore." I almost laughed.
Wait, what? If someone told me that, I'd think they were joking.
That's exactly what I thought. I looked at him and said, "What do you mean you don't study English anymore?" He said, "I still learn every day, but I don't wait until study time." At first, I didn't understand, so I asked him to explain. And he said something I've never forgotten. He said, "English isn't something I visit for 1 hour. It's something I live with all day."
Wow, that's a beautiful way to describe it.
It is, but here's the funny part. When I first heard it, I thought, that sounds inspiring, but it doesn't sound practical. I wanted instructions. I wanted a checklist. Tell me which book to buy. Tell me which app to download. Tell me how many words to memorize. Instead, he gave me an idea, and I wasn't ready for it.
So, did you ignore his advice?
For a while, yes, because ideas are harder to measure than homework. Homework feels productive. You finish a chapter. You check a box. You memorize 20 words. You feel like you've accomplished something. Living in English didn't have a checklist, and honestly, that made me uncomfortable.
I understand that. Sometimes checking something off a list feels really satisfying, even if it doesn't help as much as we think.
Exactly. Our brains love measurable progress, but real progress doesn't always look impressive. Sometimes it looks almost invisible. And that's what happened next. One morning, without making some big decision, I tried something different. Nothing dramatic, no challenge, no 30-day program, no special notebook. I was making coffee before breakfast, standing alone in my kitchen. Normally, my mind would wander in my own language, thinking about work, thinking about my plans for the day, thinking about everything except English. That morning, I asked myself one simple question. If I tried thinking about this in English?
Just while making coffee?
Just while making coffee. That's it. I looked at the kettle. The water is hot. I picked up the coffee beans. I need a little more. I opened the cupboard. Where's my favorite mug? Then I laughed, because the sentences were incredibly simple. Nothing advanced, nothing impressive. No one was listening. No one was judging me. It was just me and my thoughts.
That's actually kind of comforting. You don't have to sound fluent, you just have to think.
Exactly. And here's what surprised me. For the first time, English wasn't homework. It wasn't an exercise. It wasn't a test. It was simply part of my morning. I didn't realize it then, but something important had changed. English had left my desk and entered my life.
That's such a different way of looking at it. Most of us think English belongs in a classroom or in a textbook. You're saying it can belong in your kitchen.
Exactly. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. The next day, I tried it again. Then while walking outside. Then while grocery shopping. Then while waiting in line. Sometimes I'd see a dog walking past and think, that's a beautiful dog. Sometimes I'd look at the sky and think, it looks like it's going to rain. Sometimes I'd forget completely. Then I'd remember again. There was no pressure, no score, no perfect sentences, just little moments that slowly started connecting together.
Can I tell you something?
Of course.
When you first said live in English, I imagined something difficult, like changing your whole life overnight. But now it sounds much smaller, almost gentle.
That's exactly the word I'd use. Gentle. People often think fluency comes from huge changes. I think it often comes from hundreds of tiny moments. Moments that don't feel important at the time, until one day you realize they've changed you.
So, was this the habit? Thinking in English while doing everyday things?
Not quite. That was part of it, a very important part, but it wasn't still the whole habit. The real habit was even simpler than that. And once I understood it, everything else finally started making sense.
Wait, I'm confused. You said thinking in English wasn't the habit. So, what was it?
Do you remember the question you asked me at the beginning? When did you become fluent? I've been thinking about that question this whole conversation, and I think I finally know how to answer it. The habit wasn't thinking in English. The habit wasn't listening every day. The habit wasn't talking to myself. The habit wasn't watching videos. Those were all things I did, but they weren't the habit. The habit was much bigger. One day, I stopped treating English like a subject, and I started treating it like part of my life. That's the habit. I stopped visiting English. I started living in English.
So, all those little things, thinking while making coffee, listening on a walk, talking to yourself, they were all connected.
Exactly. Imagine a tree. People see the branches. One branch is listening. Another is speaking. Another is reading. Another is thinking. But underneath all those branches, there's one root. The root is this decision. I'm going to let English become part of my everyday life. Once that root grows, everything else starts growing too.
I really like that because before today, I thought fluency was about finding the right method. Now, it feels more like building a different lifestyle.
That's exactly how it felt for me. And here's something interesting. Nothing became easier overnight. I didn't suddenly wake up speaking perfect English. I still made mistakes. I still forgot words. I still had awkward conversations. But something had changed. For the first time, English wasn't something I escaped from after studying. It followed me into my day, in the best possible way.
Can I ask something?
Always.
How did you know it was working? I think that's something a lot of people worry about. If the progress is so small, how do you know you're actually improving?
I think that's a wonderful question, because the truth is, at first, I didn't know. For weeks, nothing felt different. I wasn't counting words. I wasn't measuring anything. I was simply living a little more of my day in English. Then, one afternoon, something happened, and I almost didn't notice it.
What happened?
I was walking home. I saw a dog chasing a ball, and without thinking, a sentence appeared in my mind. In English. There was no translating, no searching for grammar, no stopping. The sentence was simply there. I stopped walking, and I remember smiling to myself, not because the sentence was difficult. Actually, it was incredibly simple. But for the first time, English had arrived before my native language. It happened naturally. And that's when I realized something inside my brain was changing, not because I forced it, because I had quietly practiced living that way.
That gives me goosebumps because it wasn't a huge achievement. It was one tiny moment, but it meant everything.
Exactly. People imagine fluency as standing on a stage, giving a perfect speech. Sometimes fluency begins with one simple thought while you're walking home. Those quiet moments matter more than we realize.
I think that's why so many people feel discouraged. They're waiting for one giant breakthrough, when maybe progress is happening in hundreds of tiny moments they don't even notice.
I couldn't have said it better. We celebrate dramatic transformations, but real learning is usually much quieter. It's almost invisible until one day you look back and realize you've become someone different.
So, if someone watching us today wants to start, what should they do tomorrow morning? Not next month, tomorrow.
Tomorrow morning, don't change your whole life. Don't promise yourself you'll study 5 hours. Don't buy another course. Don't make another complicated plan. Instead, invite English into one ordinary moment. When you're brushing your teeth, think in English. When you're making breakfast, describe what you're doing. When you're walking outside, notice the world in English. When you're waiting for the bus, listen to a short English podcast. Don't try to impress anyone. Don't try to sound perfect. Just let English sit beside you for a little while. Then do it again tomorrow and the next day. Little by little, English stops feeling like a guest. It starts feeling like home.
I love that. English stops feeling like a guest. I've never thought about it that way.
Neither had I until I lived it. And here's something I'd like everyone watching to remember. You don't become fluent because you had one amazing study session. You become fluent because thousands of ordinary moments slowly reshape the way your brain works. Those moments don't look exciting. Most people would never notice them. But your brain notices every single one.
Can I make a promise?
Of course.
Tomorrow morning, while I make my coffee, I'm going to live in English. Maybe only for 5 minutes. But I'm going to start.
That's all it takes. Not perfection, just a beginning. Because every fluent speaker had a first ordinary day. Not a perfect day, just a first day.
You know, I think I finally understand my question from the beginning. I asked you, when did you become fluent? But now I don't think there was one day. There were thousands of days, thousands of little choices, thousands of ordinary moments.
Exactly. And that's the answer I wish someone had given me years ago. I didn't wake up one morning and become fluent. There wasn't one magical conversation. There wasn't one perfect grammar lesson. There wasn't one incredible book. One day, without realizing it, I simply noticed that English had become part of my life. I wasn't translating every thought anymore. I wasn't afraid of every mistake anymore. I wasn't waiting until study time anymore. I wasn't visiting English. I was living in it. And looking back, that was the one habit that changed everything.
I think that's something I'll remember for a long time.
I hope so. Because if there's one thing I'd love everyone watching to take away today, it's this. Don't spend your whole life waiting to feel fluent before you start living in English. Start living in English today. And one day, you might look back, just like I did, and realize that fluency didn't arrive all at once. It quietly grew beside you, one ordinary day at a time. Thank you for spending part of your day with us. And until next time, don't just study English, live in English.